Welcome, everyone, to MSP Tutor, the show where we teach MSPs something useful. Today, I'm joined by Greg Sharp from ZenContract. Welcome, Greg. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, Steve. Thank you so much for having me along.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So today's topic you want to talk about is how contract management can impact your EBIT multiplier. So let's kind of set the stage here for a moment. Can you explain what the EBIT multiplier is for maybe some of the MSPs who are not at that stage yet?
Sure, yeah. So EBIT stands for earnings before interest and tax, and what that means is all of your it's a statement of profitability. It's all of your revenue less all of your costs. That's how much cash is left over at the end of each period. Usually a month, and that will be extrapolated over to the whole year. So your profitability for a year, and then a multiplier would be how much someone's willing to pay more, or how many times it would be multiplied by that end year figure as to what the price they're willing to pay. So a worked example, Steve, would be if I had $1 million business and I made $100,000 a year, then how many times that $100,000 a year would someone be willing to pay to buy your business? That's the multiplier, right? Usually between 3 and 12, depending on the size of your business and how well it's put together and how easy it would be to buy. And that's what we're going to talk about today is how much having the right contract infrastructure and importance of contracts in maximizing the value of your business. So what effect it has on your EBIT multiplier as such.
So with MSPs, have you found that there's like a magic number that most MSPs get a, I don't know, 3x or a 7x or whatever on the multiplier, or does it vary drastically depending on so many different factors?
It can range considerably for, so right out of the box, everyone will get a default 2.5 to 3, pretty much in this environment where IT support / MSP, depending on how it's packaged up, is a desirable commodity these days. So people are interested in being in the industry that we've all built over the last sort of 20 years. People are interested in being into it. So in the old days, when you just had a break fix shop, when you sold computers and you did a little bit of services along the side, you'd probably get a 1 to 1.5 times multiplier. Now we have predictable revenue, and it's known to be an industry that's going to have longevity of a requirement, as in technology is here to stay. People that have that knowledge, they're in demand, and the service is in demand. Then you're pretty much a default 3, and then there's various levels of being operationally mature that will allow you to go from a 4 to a 5 to a 6 to a 7 and roll all the way up to a 10.
So you've seen MSPs make a 10x multiplier.
I sold my MSP in 2022 at a 10x multiplier. And then I think everyone listening here can understand the fact that I talk a little bit different than potentially you do, Steve. So I'm in a different part of the world. But I live in New Zealand on the other side of the world. But the multipliers, regardless of whether you're in New Zealand or Australia or the US or Canada or UK and Ireland, the various different MSPs can gain those multipliers, and even all the way up to 20, 30, $40 million turnover businesses. They might even go beyond a 10, but 10's pretty high up there. So, but yes, that's what we sold our business for, was 10x.
Excellent. All right, so let's talk about how contract management can affect the EBIT multiplier. It sounds like the more stability an MSP has in their revenue and predictability. So, for example, if you have 3-year contracts on all of your clients, then it sounds like that is the type of thing that will ensure that you've got a bigger multiplier.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk with, so the people who are listening, let's talk about the easy the easy stuff, Steve, right? So we've already established that you're more than likely going to get between a 2.5 and a 3 straight out of the gate, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the easy wins that get you from there to a 4, to a 5, to a 6? And that's important. And in a worked example, if you're have an MSP that's 2 million and making a profit of 100,000, and to push it from a 3 to a 4 to a 5, I mean, that math's pretty easy, isn't it? It's 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. It makes a significant difference, and even as you get your profitability up to 200,000, and then times 3, 4, 5, or whatever, it starts to really accelerate the viability and the profitability and the amount of money you can get for your business. The easy wins are anything that's contracted revenue, even if it's 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, anything that's contracted versus not contracted is worth 2 times as much. Really well proven with all of the M&A activity going on, both in North America and the rest of the world, is that anything that's under a contract at all, and it's actually not because it's under a contract of term that someone can't get out of, it's more to do with the fact that it's under a set of governed rules and terms and conditions that's not just a handshake agreement, it's against a referenceable contract that has terms and conditions. And so no real need to dive into the fact that of what those terms and conditions are. It's more of a case of when someone's buying a business, the comfort that it's against a set of known terms and conditions and not just a handshake agreement, it instantly makes it worth twice as much. So that's the first thing to do is to have a standard agreement, and everyone's against that standard agreement. You will immediately rocket from that 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. That's the easiest win.
So one of the things I just want to put out there is a lot of times I hear inexperienced MSPs talking about how, I've got $300,000 in gross revenue, so I should be able to get $1 million for my business. But they're trying to put a multiplier on the gross revenue, which I could have a $5 million MSP, but if I'm only making 50,000 in profit, I've just got a really complex job.
Yeah, you've got a job that's got a significant amount of responsibility and overhead for the fact that you're not really making that much money, right? So that 50,000 could really quite easily become minus 50,000, and then what's the point?
Right.
Yes.
So let's
your EBIT multiplier. I think it's important here to sort of labor the point. EBIT stands for earnings before interest and tax. So you might be turning over $1 million, and you have costs of $975,000. Then your business is making a $25,000 a year profit.
And that doesn't mean cost of goods sold. That means mortgage, employees, benefits, healthcare, all that stuff. All of the costs associated with running and operating your business, all of that needs to come out. So the cost of goods sold and the expenses and whatever's left, that is the money that we're multiplying.
Yeah, I mean in the real simple accounting side of things is all revenue less all expenses equals profit.
Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about
revenues for vanity, profits for sanity, right? So don't get lost in. And when we only ever talk to each other about how big our business is by talking about revenue, just because we're all relatively shy people and don't want to boast and don't want to sort of talk about how wealthy we are. Otherwise, we'd actually be talking about how profitable is your business, because it really doesn't really matter how big. You might have a $20 million business that's making a loss.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather have a $5 million business that's making some profit.
Absolutely,
so, yeah. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, that's just the other way we talk about the size of our business and how long we've been going is, how many people are you how many people do you have? Just because it's not immediately in your face is asking the question of, you know, how wealthy are you?
Right.
It's how we kind of compare the things. The official scorecard really should be, how profitable is your business?
So let's talk about contracts then. So now I feel like we've fleshed out um, the EBIT and uh, profit and all that stuff. Let's talk about contracts. So it doesn't sound like it matters as much whether your contracts are 12, 24, or 36 months. Or am I wrong?
I think if all of your revenue was on a longer year, you know, being a 2-year or a 3-year, and that was the point how you were grooming your business, getting it ready for sale, then that would be advantageous. That would affect your EBIT multiplier and in the you know, making it higher. But the biggest win is to have all of your customers operating on your standard master services agreement or your standard terms and conditions. That is the biggest, most immediate multiplier that will take you from 3 to 4 to 5 to a 6. Just making sure that you have good terms and conditions. Everyone's seen and signed those terms and conditions. That's the biggest win. It's actually also the biggest protection to you as a business owner, because everyone's then going to be aware of the rules of the game. They are going to be operating on your standard terms and conditions. There's a set of rules to refer to should they not pay you. They're aware of your service level agreement, all those types of things. And that's essentially, Steve, what it's broken down to when you're having a either a managed service agreement with terms and conditions or a master services agreement, kind of all slightly irrelevant, is having all of your customers operating on the same rules of the game. Their rules, your rule, you know, you're actually typifying what those rules are. And those rules can look over what happens when there's a problem, what happens if they don't pay you when, i.e. late in the month or into the next month, what happens, and everyone knows exactly what they've signed up to, what your service level agreement is, what they're supposed to be gaining as far as the services that you've sold them. That's essentially what it is that you're getting outside of a handshake agreement. You're getting a referenceable document that says this is how we're doing business together. That's the biggest win. So back to your point, if you are signing an agreement that has a term being 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, still always with an out clause for non-service delivery, you know, if you as the service supplier are doing a really crappy job, then the client has to have a way to get out of that. And that might be a notice of delivery of 30 days or 60 days. But even if there is an out, your business is still worth twice as much, or that contract is worth twice as much as a saleable entity if it's against a signed agreement as opposed to not. So you don't have to have the ability to be able to lock in your customers to a long-term period. They will always have an out clause for non-service delivery.
All right. So contract standardization, that's what I'm hearing. So everyone should be signing against the same terms and conditions. You should have one master services agreement that all of your clients abide by.
Yeah, that should be the default, is that you have a standard terms and conditions, or people are now referring to it as you just have, and correctly so, being a master services agreement. That is the foundational document that underpins each of your customers' relationship with you. What happens if there's a problem? What happens at the default interest rate if they don't pay you? What's the escalation point? Who are the main parties? All those foundational stuff. And what the master services agreement doesn't have, Steve, is pricing or a term. All right. That's the foundational document that sits in perpetuity and just sits here and underpins your relationship, right? So there's no pricing and there's no term. And what's good about that is when you announce, or by email or BCC email, you send out an email to all of your clients saying that, thank you for your business. my MSP is going through a contract maturation process. We're going to be sending you a master services agreement. There's no pricing, there's no term. We're not locking you into anything, but it just underpins our relationship and gives all the rules of the game. With obviously, you wouldn't say that in the email, but you use different language. But that's essentially what you're doing, is getting everyone onto the same digital paper and the same contract terms with your master services agreement. And then each time you sell them something with a start date and an end date and pricing, you don't have to have any terms in there because all the terms are back in that document.
All right. So we're sorry, distractions because kids are home from school,
Right.
All right. So obviously you're not a lawyer, so I'm not asking you for legal advice. However, what are some best practices for structuring the MSP contracts to maximize profitability?
Yeah. So the best thing, you're right. I don't have a law degree. I mean, I've got a commercial law degree, but it's a little bit old and it's in a different country. But within inside of our business, we have qualified lawyers and things. But the biggest thing for MSPs listening is that the documents don't need to be lost in the world of legalese and really complicated things. They need to set out the rules of the game for what's responsible for your customers, what's responsible for you as the MSP supplier, and then what happens when the shit hits the fan or when something goes wrong, so everyone knows what the thing is. And so the actual documents themselves, that they need to be easy to read and easy for each party to understand. That's really important. They shouldn't be long documents. They obviously need to cover particular contract law things for each jurisdiction, but we're not going to get lost in that. But for profitability, for both parties, they need to be easy to understand and easy to follow. They need to cover off things. There's a detailed but not too extensive list around professional indemnity, who's responsible and what causes, when there's a problem, who's liable for what's the communication status that are there. The biggest profitability thing that can happen for each party, being the MSP or the client, is for the rules of the game to be documented and signed and then referenceable. Because most of the time when we used to have a managed service agreement, and it would be signed by one party on someone's desk with a dog paw print and a coffee stain on it, and you could never find it when you wanted it. So the biggest thing that can happen is it's signed by both parties and it's easy to find when you need it.
So how can MSPs leverage contract data to identify opportunities for like upselling, cross-selling, or renegotiating terms? Is that something that they should be doing?
Yeah, most definitely. And that's one of the beauties of actually having a contract with a term date, even if you don't have increased pricing or anything like that set, is it gives you the opportunity to talk to your customers around what you used to be paying and what you should be paying moving forward. Because as you and I both know, Steve, then stuff gets more expensive. You're certainly paying more for milk and cheese, the cost of your labor supply, the people working for you, even your labor supply being for yourself, you should get being paid a little bit more each year. It's important that you have the ability to be able to have a discussion with your customers on a semi-regular basis to talk about an increase in prices. That's the argument with some people in the nicer states. Certainly when I'm talking to people in Canada and even Australia, they're a big fan of the handshake agreement, and that just goes on in perpetuity. Even the ConnectWise people that use our software, those contracts typically were set up in the early days with just no end date. That's actually how the software is built, which is great for minimizing administration, but it's not so great in the fact that you want to talk to your customers on a semi-regular basis about the cost of goods. Being licenses might have increased, labor's been increased, consumer price index or inflation is a pretty international universal term. Everything becomes more expensive over time. So you want to have a repricing discussion. That's the foundational thing. And then the next thing is that when you get on a new customer, typically you'll sell them managed services or managed support, maybe with a voice network or a data network. But each MSP over time will have 8 or 9 different product offerings, right? From managed VCIO to managed security, obviously is very pertinent these days and incredibly important moving forward. You might have a managed Wi-Fi or a managed network, maybe even some application support or application delivery. There'll be 8 or 9 services that each MSP has, and they probably only start off selling them 2 or 3. So you want to do this white space analysis of what are all my customers, what am I currently selling them, and what could I be selling them? And so at the end of each term of the initial contract, whatever, you want to be both increasing the prices and talking to them about selling them the other services that you're not currently selling them. So this white space analysis concept is all of your customers and what are you currently selling them and what are you not currently selling them. You want to fill in that space. That's the white space to be able to get the wider wallet spend. Most MSPs are using a land and expand strategy, even if they don't know about it. You want to get a customer and you want to expand into that customer all of the other services that you're not currently selling them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something that I'll be honest, I've never really thought about before, but we're gonna give it a go and see what happens.
Okay.
Let's talk about revenue leakage. What impact can effective contract lifecycle management have on reducing revenue leakage and improving cash flow?
The definition of revenue leakage in its most basic form is you're running a customer that when you signed up has 12 users. And then when you go and do a bit of an audit or have a look at them or even have a look at their CSP portal, they've actually got 15 or 16 or 17 users, but they're still paying you for 12. That's revenue leakage. My pet hate in the 25 years that I've been in the industry, Steve, is doing the work, but you're not getting paid for all of it. That's leakage. It's I think it's worse than infidelity in my book. Anyway, it's not a great place to be. And so the right contract infrastructure, there's two sides to it. The first one is you want to have in your master services agreement the ability to be able to back bill. If you go and do an audit and you see that you're actually supporting 16, but you're only getting paid for 12, you want to have the contractual ability to be able to pass those costs back to the customer and get paid for them. That's rule number one. If that's not in your terms and conditions, then you don't have the ability to back bill for it. You can only have a discussion with them about changing your current contract from bill from 12 to 16 now, not for the work that you've already done. But with the addition of a standard clause that says we can do a quarterly true up or back bill for work done, then you can at least have the contractual ability to get paid for it. The second thing is having an automated ability to be able to look into your CSP portal and make sure that your amount you're contracted for is the same as the amount that you're actually billing for. And there's a couple of tools that do that. One's cloudolive.com and the other one's zenith.com. They can automatically adjust your bill, and then obviously using ZenContract, which being our tool, you can have the foundational ability to be able to put that on your bill and be contracted in the right place. So yeah, revenue leakage is a big deal. It's also applicable if you're buying telco or voice services or network services or something that's outside of your supply, maybe even software services with the NCE. You want to make sure that the responsibility is if that relationship's not there anymore is that you've got the ability to be able to on-bill those costs. But yeah, certainly understanding your revenue leakage, opportunity cost for those products that you're buying, but not being able to actually on charge is probably where most MSPs margins get eaten. We should all be making 20% net profit minimum, maybe even larger, but that's usually why the industry standard under 10 mil turnover ends up being 10% net profit is because most of our margin is eaten down by not tracking the costs. We're doing the work but not charging for it. Those types of things actually get in the way, and that's usually around business, practice. Most of us didn't start off as business people. Most of us started off as technologists that ended up having enough work to be able to build a business around it. But that's where a lot of the margin gets eaten away, Steve, is in that revenue leakage side of things.
Now let's talk about contract compliance. What role does contract compliance play in mitigating risks and avoiding costly disputes that can erode the EBIT or profit?
Yeah, and pretty much exactly. It's another sort of factor as to what we were just talking about as to where our profitability gets eroded away. And on a handshake agreement, there is a lot of implication or thoughts about how the relationship should be put together by both parties. Many of the clients, like, you're our IT person, you should just be covering that. You might have told me 3 times to have that extra security product, but I've just chosen not to listen to you, and now there's a problem. It's your problem anyway. Well, I'm just going to make you responsible for it. And so contract compliance really talks about, do both parties know what the rules of the game are? When there's a dispute, can we go back to that agreement to make sure that the right level of responsibility or liability is held with each party? Because when you're supplying the IT services, you're pretty much under the gun anyway. You remember that days. I mean, you're the IT guy. You're responsible. You were supposed to protect me. You're supposed to make sure that my IT stuff is running as optimally as it should be. You as a risk, as a business risk arrangement, you need to make sure that you have an agreement to refer to that says, I'm liable to this point. I've informed you about using these security products and you've chosen not to, therefore the liability is no longer with me. And that's important these days because there's a lot more cybersecurity incidents than there used to be. There's a lot more implication of risk on you as the service provider than there used to be. And you want to make sure that you limit that risk by having a proper contract that's compliant with certain requirements. That's pretty much where it comes down to, is the implication of risk on you as the supplier, and to make sure that you've got something to refer back to.
Now, I know MSPs should at least know how to look at hours worked and cost of goods sold versus what revenue came in to determine profitability. But what are some strategies that MSPs can use contract data to inform pricing decisions and improve their margins?
Yeah, so each of the contracts, and so within the PSA, then there'll be the ability to be able to form a contract that says, if we're looking after a company that's 50 people, then we're going to charge them, just to make it easy math, $5,000 a month, $100 a seat. I want to be able to understand how much labor costs I'm putting against that, i.e. how many tickets are we opening per month, how many hours are spent on each of those tickets, therefore how much labor am I putting against that contract. Obviously, the less labor, the more profit, the more labor, the less profit. It just burns that rate down, right? And so what you're starting to understand once you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 9 contracts is which ones are profitable and which ones are not. And so you get to understand what your pricing should be to be able to make the profit that you want. What most of MSPs do is look at what their competitors are charging on a per person basis per month, and they will do a multiplier of that and then try and make it work. I would urge the people listening to that is that's not how you should go about doing your pricing. You should go bottom up and understand how much it costs to deliver that service each month and then add a margin on top.
Yeah.
So Most people just look at the market and go, hey, my competitor's charging, wow, it seems really cheap, only $85 per month, and it includes a bit of licensing or whatever. And so they'll do a multiplier of that and then just try and make it work. But typically we're not efficient at delivering those services, and so it's very hard to make a profit. Better way would be to say my hourly rate to myself or my engineer is $50 an hour. Each of these people that I'm looking to support will probably create one ticket per month and then build it. So go bottom costs up and add a margin on top. The hard side of that is you've then got to go and sell it to the market. But it won't be dramatically different, but it will just give you a good understanding of how much it costs you to deliver that service product on a per hour rate basis.
So contract negotiation, that's everyone's favorite thing to do, right? Is how much wiggle room should we be allowing our clients to have? How many terms do we allow them to negotiate?
So I've had that conversation many times, and where we all as an industry get really awkward, and that's what it pretty much comes down to, is most of us don't really like confrontation. And so basically when you're standing and having a negotiation with your customer, if you're not really knowledgeable about how much your product costs to deliver, then it feels like you're asking the customer to actually just pay your price because you're good people. When what we just talked about before, when you know what it costs to supply that service, i.e. the cost of your labor, plus the cost of the licenses, plus the cost of your overhead, plus the cost of your coffee capsules for your staff, everything included on a monthly and an hourly basis, then you feel really comfortable being able to say, hey, to Mr. or Mrs. Customer, this is what it costs to be able to supply this service, and this is our little bit of margin on top. You're never really going to be too worried about having to negotiate a contract anymore when you know those figures, because you can just communicate to them, hey, this is what it costs, and this is what it costs. The client needs your services. They're either going to get it from you or from someone else. So they're either going to get it from you or someone else, and really the price of it's going to be only one of 3 or 4 factors. If you can articulate what that service costs, right? And there's not going to be a dramatic difference between you and your competitors. Really, you might be talking about $120 per user versus $140 per user, or $20 per user, whatever it is. So it's more then around, do they like doing business with you? Are you local? Do you help out in the local community? Are you one of the local sponsors for the kids' softball team or baseball team or something? Those types of things will start to come into play. It probably becomes a bit more pertinent when you're asking more and more for your services as a bit more of an established company. And but I think, again, your negotiation will be factors around what value add comes in. If the price is $2,000 a month and your competitor is $1,800 a month, it won't always come down to just the price. It'll be, are you getting extra services for that around quarterly business reviews or software audits or extra security products or whatever? Those are the types of things you really need to sort of factor in there. You might offer a discount for going on a 1-year contract as opposed to month by month, or a 2 years versus 3 years, just to get some longevity of revenue. You could give a monthly discount to that. You might be slightly discounted for only being remote and have a slightly higher portion for having some on-site capability of it. But I think the biggest thing so I do some coaching with MSPs, and the biggest thing I get to talk to principals around is, if you know your numbers from the ground up, then you're going to have more comfort in actually asking for the price of what it costs to deliver, rather than guessing what it costs to actually deliver and then hoping that the customer pays it.
So I gotta say, I don't know, maybe it's the way I was raised, but I always thought talking about my costs and profits with clients was like taboo, like one of those things you're just not supposed to do. Like, because as soon as they understand that I've got profit margin here, now they want to reduce that profit margin because they want to be closer to the cost.
The good thing is in our industry is that we don't actually make horrendous profits.
Right.
So it's actually quite a humble industry, and we're much more like a trade than we are than maybe like a having 400% margin in Nike sneakers. We as an industry don't have that type of that type of profit, right? You can attain it when you have scale, as in
Hmm.
at $20 million, you might get a really high, profit margin. But most of us are not like that. Most of us are running $500,000 through to $4 million turnover businesses, right? And so I'm not suggesting that you, in a contract negotiation, that you should go and say, hey, my cost of software is this, I'm paying myself this, therefore I've got this margin here. But I think if you were to have a reasonably open conversation with your end customers around the fact, and this is probably where you're trying to increase the costs or increase the margin or increase the price on a contract, not necessarily a new customer conversation. But if you were reasonably open and said, hey, cost of labor's gone up and this is the cost of the supply, and then we've got a minor but still a margin figure in here, that's just what it costs to be able to deliver the services, that actually would be a healthy discussion, because they're on the same side of the fence. They're supplying a product and adding a profit margin and doing the same thing. We're all in business. It's just how the world goes around. I think most of us, because we're typically quite humble people and not wanting to take advantage of society, then we're actually a bit worried about actually charging or making any sort of profit. Whereas everyone's quite comfortable with a reasonable, healthy, fair price.
Hmm.
That's where I think it gets really confident for you as a contract negotiator, is if you know that your costs of goods and your margin figure are X, but they're not excessive. It's not an excessive margin. Then you know that you're not taking advantage of anyone. More than likely, the people that you are talking to that are in manufacturing or supply that might actually make a product for $1 and sell it for $9, those are amazing margins, right?
Hmm.
We don't have that. Our cost of goods will be $100 and we're trying to sell it for 125. That's not excessive.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that contracts help with are uh, defining things like SLAs. And that's a great way for MSPs to kind of like standardize and optimize their service delivery, um, by saying, you know what, for this type of issue, we're going to respond in 15 minutes or in an hour or whatever your SLA is, right? As long as you're standardizing your service across the board and giving all of your clients the same SLA, or at least all of your clients that have this service the same SLA, then that's
Yeah.
going to optimize your service delivery, and it's going to improve your efficiency, and it's going to improve your margins. Is there anything else that you can think of that SLAs in the contracts are going to help us with?
A lot of MSPs that we see around the world, a lot of people are going to the good, better, and best pricing model, right? So, and that's important. That's good. That helps with the buying decision when you're selling to customers and allowing your customers to consume your services. But the confusion comes in, Steve, is that many MSPs are offering a different service level agreement between the gold, the silver, and the bronze. And could you imagine how confusing that is for the engineers when a problem comes in? They need to know how important that is for each of their different customers. That just shouldn't be done. So it's one service level agreement across all of your customers. That's incredibly important. So each and every customer gets treated the same way when there is an issue. And then exactly to your point, there is a standard service level agreement that says if it's a P1, we're going to talk to you in 15 minutes. We're going to solve that problem within an hour. P1 would be company-wide outage. No one can work. And then there's a P2 or, priority 2, and that might be we're going to respond to that in 30 minutes and we're going to solve that within 4 hours. And then P3 might be respond in 4 hours, solve it within a day. And P4, there's each of those things. If anyone's looking for a service level agreement definition, ChatGPT will help you out straight away. You just got to give it the right prompts. But I think that's the biggest point I could make is I've seen MSPs get lost in providing different service level agreements to different tiers of service. There should be one service agreement, and you would just supply different levels of protection or on-site support or whatever across your different levels. So gold, silver, and bronze. Those types of things utterly should be defined in your master services agreement so that each party knows exactly what they're buying, what they're buying and what they're being paid for, and what you are supplying as a service. The service level agreement should be defined in any sort of agreement that you have with your customer. We are a service industry. We have to define what is the services that we are supplying. And ultimately, when it gets boiled down to, it is around a service that is, if I've got something broken, I want to ring Steve Taylor, and I know that you're going to answer the phone and solve my problem within X amount of time. That's a service level agreement.
So let's talk about the part of contracts that I think is the most scary for MSPs, renewals. Is there a way to streamline the renewal process and reduce churn without making it difficult for clients to cancel? Because that's the one thing, and I'm not going to name names, but if you're an MSP, you can probably think of some of companies that make it difficult for you to cancel when you decide you want to take your ball and go home, right? So I want to make sure that I'm prefacing this to say I don't want to become the bad guy, but I want to streamline the renewal process and reduce churn. So how do we do that?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You want to make sure that you've got a process that alerts you as to when your renewals are coming up, right? I'm talking about the renewals of your customers. So customer X is buying your services from your, Steve Taylor MSP in Ohio. And you've got 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 customers, and you want to make sure that you know in advance that that particular customer's renewal is coming up, usually within sort of 30 or 60 days notice, because you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to go and speak to that customer about increase in pricing, selling them other services, renewing the services that you're buying for them from a supplier. It might be the NCE licenses, it might be their network, it might be their internet connection, whatever it is you're buying on their behalf. You will always have a much better chance of increasing their prices and making sure that the contract gets renewed if you are the most organized person in the room. If that contract expires and you're trying to go and renew it after it's already expired, you'll never get the same great result that you would do otherwise if you were organized and doing it in advance. So you need a reminder system. You need some type of system that will tell you in advance that there's a renewal coming up. You need to have that en masse for all of your customers. But I think a lot of MSPs typically get scared about having a conversation with their customers about a renewal because they don't want to poke the bear. They don't want to make the customer aware that there's a renewal coming up because then they might have the ability to cancel. I think the biggest thing is to make all of the listeners aware that if you were doing anything other than a good job, then the ability for the customer is that they can always cancel. They just stop paying you. There's nothing in your contract apart from having the ability to be able to pass on costs from stuff you're buying on their behalf apart from that, there's nothing in your contract that would stop your customer having the ability to get out of your service contract for you doing a shit job. If you're doing a crappy job, anyone can get out of any contract at any time. What they can't get out of is if you've bought NCE licenses for 12 months and in your contract it says, if we don't do business anymore, I can pass you those costs on. That sticks. But if you're doing a crap job, someone can get out of your contract anyway. You're better off actually, Steve, giving them an out clause that says for non-service delivery, or if we're doing a crappy job, you're able to terminate our services in 30 or 60 days with written notice. That's a much more normal arrangement. Even just for service now, there's no way you can tie someone in for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years if you're doing a crap job.
Right. Yeah. All right. So I feel like I've almost exhausted my list of questions that I had for you. What is there anything else that you think MSPs need to know about contract management?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I think is most MSPs get, they're stuck in this limbo of, hey, I don't want to upset my customer by trying to get them to sign up to a contract, because most MSPs think that having a word contract means that you're trying to lock your customer into a term. That's not what we're talking about at all.
Right.
Like we just sort of talked about, if you're doing a crappy job, anyone can get out of any contract. What's good about a contract, even with no term, any contract can have in there, if you don't like our services, you can give us 30 days notice and get out. Big out clause. You can put a big out clause in there. That's actually not, when someone's looking to buy your business, or maybe you're looking to borrow from a bank and scale up to buy another smaller business or something like that. Yeah, what everyone's looking for is not the fact that there is a all-binding contract to lock revenue in for 3 years. What they're looking for is that you have a documented, known set of rules of the game with you and your customer and your wider customers that is repeatable, that they know that what the rules of the game are, that it has the ability to be able to have a pricing discussion when there's it documents the service level agreement. It documents what's to be done if there's a pricing dispute. No one's trying to lock anyone into a long-term arrangement, right? Those days have gone. Even if you had some wording in there that tried to lock someone in, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. The contract, and certainly in a master services agreement, is the ability to be able to both parties to know exactly what's going on, and it can give you some protection in the circumstance of liability. That's the important part. I think that's the biggest takeaway I could give, Steve, is that the word contract doesn't mean long-term commitment. Contract means rules of the game and understanding and clarity by both parties.
Absolutely.
And by having that clarity of both parties, your business is worth more. It's more operationally efficient. There's less risk to you. Those are all good things.
And so you are founder and CEO of ZenContract. You are a contract management platform for MSPs. So
yes, specifically written. I've been 25 years in the MSP industry. Have built 3 from scratch, built them up to reasonably large size and sold them off. Bought other MSPs and tapped them in, and so MSPs been my game for some time. Like I said, with my crazy accent, it's in another part of the world, but pretty similar between New Zealand, Australia, the US, and Canada, the UK, and Ireland. And so part of what was important when I was getting my business to be operationally efficient and mature, and then eventually for sale, was getting all of the contracts in order. And we started in 2018. We built this tool that managed the process of templatization and e-signatures and storing and contract profitability. We had that for our MSP So we built this product called ZenContract, and that's exactly what it does. It manages the whole contract process specifically for MSPs from beginning to end. Right. So that's a software as a service product. We also have legal services and proposal design services that sit on top of that.
So with your experience, both running MSPs and running ZenContract, is there like one or two things that you see MSPs doing wrong the most across the board with their contracts?
Yeah, so pricing the contract, so looking at the market and then pricing it according to what their competition are doing. I think that's probably something I see a lot. And the other thing is shying away from having any sort of written agreement with their customer because they're worried about having to lock their customer into a long-term arrangement. That fear should go away. There's more inefficiency and risk implications in having a handshake agreement that people don't even think about, right? So both parties are not really clear about the relationship when there's a handshake agreement, and just because you've done business that way for years and years and years and years doesn't mean that's the way you should do it moving forward again and again and again, because you don't have the ability to be able to have a regular pricing discussion. You're probably supplying that customer the same pricing they got 15 years ago as you are right now, right? And the only person losing out on that is you. You're doing
Craig,
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Thank you so much for coming on here and having this conversation. And MSPs, if you guys are interested in learning more about ZenContract, go to the channel program website and just type in ZenContract on the search bar. It is all one word, right, Greg?
Yeah, with the Z.
Yeah, ZEN contract, all one word. And you'll be able to learn more. You'll be able to see reviews of other MSPs that really use the product. And you even have the ability to hit a button and fill out a form to get your own personalized demo of their solution. So
yeah, absolutely, and within your time zone too. So we've got people in the US. You don't have to speak to someone on the other side of the world. So we'd love to help out. We've joined the crew of hundreds of MSPs that are using the product and benefiting from the service across North America, and the word and getting your MSP contract sort of compliant and ready. It's a great place to be. Sleep better at night.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll catch you at the next one.